Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be showing you how to cut a bridle joint entirely by hand, no machines whatsoever. So, let's go. So, 2 blank bits of timber. Let's get in close and see what tools we need. So, tools we need for this are marking knife, a square, a mortise gauge, your Jesus pen, a saw, chisel, and a hammer. And what would make this joint even easier to cut is firstly, a shoulder plane or a router plane, and a crosscut saw for obviously the cross cutting, but a rip saw will do that. So, let's get in and mark this thing out, shall we? Right, so firstly, let's move all of this rubbish actually out the way. So obviously, first thing we're going to do here is mark our face sides and face edges. So, I mean, they both look good, so that is going to be the outside face there, I reckon, and this one here can be the outside face as well. So there we go, those bits are going to go together like that, or like that, it doesn't really matter. So, next thing we're going to do is mark the width of this component into this component and vice versa. So, we are going to get our square for that, reference it off the face edge here, and then pop the other component on, get it flush on the end. If the end of this isn't perfectly square, you can leave it overhanging a little bit by about 1 millimeter or so. I'm going to leave this overhanging by a small fraction. So there we go, and then just square that across with a knife. And we're going to go all the way around this component, making sure to reference off either the face side or the face edge. So I'm going to work my way around now. Cool, so we're done on that one. We're going to do exactly the same on this one now. So referencing off the face side, get it on there, leave it overhanging by a tiny bit so we've got stuff to plane off at the end. Okay, so they're marked up all the way around now, so we're just going to set up our mortise gauge. Now I know these components to be 26 millimeters, and for a bridle joint to get maximum strength, you just want to divide that by 3, so that obviously isn't happening. We're going to get as close as possible, so I'm going to do some quick maths. 26 divided by 3 equals 8.6. So I think 8.6, I'm going to make that middle section 9 millimeters, round it up, and then the outer ones will be whatever's left. So let's get this set up first. So a good addition to get to these Veritas mortise gauges is a shaft clamp down here, which allows you to move both of these blades in unison up and down, so that I can set the width to 9 millimeters in this case, and then I can obviously adjust the offset without changing the distance between these two heads. I haven't actually got around to buying the shaft clamp on there yet, so I'm going to do this a different way. If I mark halfway on here, so 26 divided by 2 is obviously 13. So I'll do a little knife mark there, and then I can just offset that by 4.5 either side, and then I have a 9 millimeter tongue in the middle. So there we go, on there I've got a little point here, a little point here, and then that is my 9 millimeters on there. So now I can just set these up to hit both of those points. And obviously here I'm still referencing off the face side here to allow our joint to go together flush at the end of it. So there we go, that one's locked on that point down there, that one is locked on the upper point, so now we can go all the way around. With this, it's tempting to sort of try and do them both at once. Don't bother with that, just do them one at a time. So the far side down to start with, and then I'll do the one closest to me. There we go, so that one is marked all the way around, and we're going to do the same on here, referencing off our face sides all the way around. There we go, so those are both exactly the same components now. The only thing we need to do now is make sure we remove the correct material on each of them. So if we assemble them like we have done here, so face sides out and up, so it doesn't matter which way around we do this, but we need to make sure we're removing this outside one on here, and this outside cheek on here. And then on this other component, we are removing this middle section. We're not removing the outer cheeks because that's going to give us 2 tenons, which obviously we don't want because it's not going to go together. Just scribble your waste on there. And now we're ready to hack it out. So, to the vise. Okay, so firstly we're going to remove the component with the waste on the outside. So, as I said in the videos on how to cut a lap joint, I think it was, don't have the workpiece up like this because then you're committing to cutting this top line here, and you're also committing to cutting both of these, so 3 lines altogether. If you tilt it forwards like this, then I can work to this line that I'm looking at now and this line here. I don't have to worry about this one on the back. When I get to that, I can flip it over and continue with it there. So then I'm focusing on 2 lines and then 1 line instead of 3 all at once. It's worth saying now that I did a video on how to saw correctly, so the link's up in the top corner here. I'd watch that before you do this because it's going to give you a few tips. And as with all the other joints, I'm not going to cut directly to that line because I like to clean up afterwards with a chisel. Okay, so that's that side all done. Now we're just going to flip it over and, like I say, continue with this other line here. Okay, so now obviously that has left us with a pyramid in the middle of here where we've worked from both sides, so we're just going to remove that now. So saw down through the top, that's going to lock into place with all three of those lines. Lovely, now remove the cheeks on that. And obviously this is where a cross-cut saw is going to be better because we're cutting across the grain, but you could still use your rip saw for this. So get as close to that line as you dare, and then just cut it all off. Voila, there we go. Now we have one part of our bridle joint. Okay, so now we've got to work on removing the waste in this middle section here to accept the tenon that we have just cut. Now, one thing to note about this, it's not a problem with thicker components like this, but when you start working down with thinner components where this gap in here is, say, 6mm or not, it's very difficult to get your chisel in there and clean it up. So this being 9mm, it's perfectly okay, but if it is thinner, you may have to resort to cutting straight to the line with the saw, which obviously for some people is quite a daunting thought. The other option is get yourself a paring chisel. I mentioned them in my video, what chisels do you need? The link is up here for that. And another quality of a paring chisel is that it has a slightly thinner section on it, so you may be able to get a little bit further into there. If you think about it, you only need to get in halfway from each side in order to reach the middle, so it's not too bad. But anyway, let's get hacking it out. And to remove this material in the middle here, you could get a chisel, work from both sides and just take out small chunks at a time until you can obviously remove that section. I forgot to mention it in the intro again, but you could also use a coping saw or fret saw for this, so that's what I'm going to do, make life a bit easier. Okay, and there we go. So now let's get cleaning this all up. So to remove this section here, we're just going to get the widest chisel we can find that's going to fit in there and then just work through halfway from each side. And the same with all the other joints, we don't want to go straight into that shoulder line because it's just going to compress it back. We want to keep halving the material until we can't halve it anymore. So I'm about 1mm away. I'm going to take it to 0.5 millimeter. And again, I'm standing here, so I'm facing it this way, and I can see if the chisel is tilting forwards or backwards. If I was standing looking at it from this way, you can't see that angle. So we're down to that shoulder line. Let's just flip it over and do the other side now. I could have got way closer with the fret saw, but oh well. Okay, right. So that is all chopped down to the baseline now, and now we can just work our way around these edges and pare that down so that we get a nice crisp joint all the way down to those lines that we've marked. Okay, so before working our way down to this line along here, we want to make sure that it's not going to split below that shoulder line there, because obviously if I whack it into there, it's just going to follow the grain and it's going to break out below there. So I'm just going to get my chisel in there and then just give it a few small taps. Just chop out the corner up to the edge of that line, so a few more. There we go, so that's just a tiny bit beyond it now, and that's going to stop it splitting below that shoulder line. So now I can start working it back, but still I don't want to put my chisel straight into that line. I want to work it back halfway at a time, obviously. So half that material there, and I'm looking at it with my sight going down this line here, so again I can see if that chisel is tilting forwards or backwards. When you're working back to this line, don't go smashing straight through all the way either, because if I start doing that, you see how it's splitting away from the edge of the chisel here? That's going to continue on up, and it may go past that shoulder line there. So just do small taps, establish the line along the top, like that. So now we're about 0.5 millimeter away, and then we're just going to pop a chisel in that line and give it a little bit more welly. But again, don't give it all the way through, it's still splitting beyond that line. Essentially, all we're doing at this point is just establishing that outer line. This is where you want to make sure it's particularly square. So now that outer line there is all established. We can just break that off. And we're going to do that to both sides on all three faces. Okay, so now I've worked my way all the way around. We're down to the baseline on all 3 edges, and now we've just got the small humps in the middle to remove. So all I'm going to do is obviously have the work upright like this, and I'm just going to work through it with a chisel like this, and just eyeball it as I go through. I know this top edge here is perfectly flat, so I can use the bottom of the chisel to register against that and make sure that we are running flat all the way through. Okay, there we go. So just every now and then remove all the fluff out of it. Pretty satisfying job. And just keep working your way around. Okay, I think I've given enough attention to this side. I'm just going to flip it around now and do the same on the other side. Okay, so I've worked the inside of this. We got down to the cheeks pretty nicely. The next thing I'm going to do is just check this bottom shoulder line here. There you go. And you see it's rocking like that. So it means that we've got a high point in the middle. So I'm just going to pare through on there and just remove that high point. And again, you could undercut this area if you want. In fact, I am going to do that this time. So all an undercut is, we're just going to angle the chisel up ever so slightly and put a small dip in the middle. You're never going to see it, so it doesn't really matter. So you see that's it flat in there. I'm just going to lift it up about that much. Tiny, tiny amount. There you go. There's that side undercut. There you go. And just clean out the fluff that I can see in the corners down here. And now we can get trimming down the tenon to fit into this. Okay, so to trim this part of the joint, it's going to be very similar to the lap joint, so I'm only going to skim over it. What we're going to do is work down to this shoulder line first. So again, looking at it from this direction to check if the chisel is tilting or not. We're going to halve that material to take it about 0.5 millimeter away from the shoulder line, do our final chop all the way along. Same on this side. And then on these edges here, we're going to pare our way in from each of them down to that baseline. And then once that has been established on both of them, we're going to come back with either a shoulder plane or a router plane and take out the remaining material in the middle, making sure that we don't hit any of these edges that we've just pared down to. If you don't have a shoulder plane or a router plane, do exactly as I said, work in from all 3 edges and then pop a ruler on there and then use that to determine where any high spots are. Mark off those high spots with a pencil and then just pare them out like that. So, cue the cinematic cut in, whatever you call it. Okay, so I've been tweaking the finish of this for the past 10 minutes or so, and I've just been checking it with a ruler to make sure there's no high spots on it. And in fact, I've just actually spotted one there. That's embarrassing. Just a tiny bit there, which was preventing the ruler from touching the edge here, so just get rid of that. Okay, so let's see how these fit together. So we've got face side out, face side out. There we go. It's pretty good. So it's a little bit loose in there. The shoulders are all closing up nicely. It's all good along here. So seeing as that's pretty loose in there, what I'm going to do is glue it up. We're going to plane it and then we'll see what the finished result is. So here we go. Okay, so flash forward a few days later and this is all glued up now. So word of note of how I glued this up. It's obviously a bit of a mess at the moment, but all I've got here is a clamp going this way. I've got a clamp going this way, so then that's pushing the shoulders into each other. And then just to close any hairline gaps or something like that between the bridle joints, I've got this clamp pressing the cheeks together. So let's disassemble this and see how it has turned out. Oh, hello. Okay, so it's flush on the shoulders, which is all good, and that comes from marking off the same face side and face edge. Means that all of our errors are going to be cancelled out and it's going to line up perfectly, which it has. Got a tiny, tiny step to remove there. Along here, no gaps whatsoever, which is all good. So that comes from paring down to that marking gauge line carefully. However, if you were more confident with the saw, you could try and attack that, but over something this sort of size, I would probably try and chisel it, to be fair. So anyway, let's get it planed up and see what it looks like cleaned up. Okay, so I'll clamp this in the tail vise. Sorry if the audio is a little bit different. My lapel mic has died, so I'm using this box at the moment, so it might sound a bit different. Okay, so I'm very happy with that. Let's take a closer look at it. Okay, so with that all planed up, you can see that along here, there is no gaps whatsoever, which is all good. The shoulder lines along here are looking pretty good as well. No issues with those. Yeah, just comes from careful marking out and paring down to that shoulder line, and you're going to get very minimal gaps, if any. And of course, you can rely on your trusty cramps going this way and also pressing the shoulders in to get rid of any small gaps that you might have encountered. And that is how you cut a bridle joint or a corner bridle joint. So take your time with it and the results will be worth it. This joint looks absolutely beautiful with finish on it because of the contrast between end grain and long grain. So yeah, take your time, get those corners really nice and crisp. At the end of it, you will be laughing. So there we go. I hope you found that informative, useful, whatever. See you in the next one.